Carved works is the collective term used for wooden decorations mounted aboard a ship. They've largely gone extinct, since they serve no purpose other than aesthetic. Historically, they were one of the most important parts of the vessel. They were a vital propaganda tool for showing the power and affluence of the shipbuilder. Figureheads were considered to have magical properties. They were a sort of good luck charm that could guide them to their destination and protect the ship from environmental hazards and evil spirits. The tradition is older than you might think. The first vessels built in the ancient Baltic were dugout canoes, planks sewn together, or skin boats stretched over a frame of branches. Some of them had outriggers to improve their balance, but this technology faded away sometime before the Iron Age. The earliest findings of a figurehead dates back to the Stone Age. In Lehtojärvi in Finland, they discovered a piece of wood carved into the likeness of an elk. Contrary to our vision of a colorless prehistory, it appears to have been painted red, and is believed to have been mounted in the front of a boat. The Lehtojärvi sculpture corresponds with findings from similar Stone Age cultures, so the concept was likely practiced across the world. In the West Indies, a warlike people called the Carib, from whom the Caribbean is named, were described as decorating their dugout canoes. In the late 1600s, Jean-Baptiste Labat described one as follows. The boat was 42 feet long, and the stern was built to form a poop. On this poop they had carved the head of a monkey in bas-relief, and near this carving they had fastened a human arm. The Carib were known to take human limbs as trophies. Moving on to the Mediterranean civilizations. Since at least the late Bronze Age, the ancient Greeks would decorate the bows of their ships with eyes, almost giving them a sort of face. The earliest example is a clay model from Philakopi. As the ancient era progressed into the classical, eyes became the norm on Greek and later Roman ships. All types of watercraft, from small boats to merchant ships and galleys, were decorated with eyes. They were either painted directly on the woodwork or made from marble. Archaeological findings describe the marble eyes as flat, with hollow pupils allowing them to be fixed by a nail to the ship's bow. The eyes would have been mounted above a protrusion to, prevent them from spinning around on the nail. The marble eyes would also have been painted. It has been hypothesized that these marble eyes were not fixed to the ship, but made as symbolic representations of the ship itself. Think like an avatar of the ship. It would then have been offered as sacrifice to the gods. The Greeks would often sacrifice other ship parts, like rudders, rams, figureheads, and even entire ships. The rams, known as embolos, were made from metal and came in the shapes of tridents and animals, usually boars. Rams captured from enemy ships were used for decorating the speaker's platform on Greek and later Roman vessels. The eyes were believed to have magical powers. They could have acted as epiphanies for the guardian spirit inhabiting the vessel. A passage from the Odyssey tells us what this sort of spirit would have been like. For the Phaeacians have no pilots, nor steering oars such as other ships have, but the ships themselves understand the thoughts and minds of men, and they know the cities and rich fields of all peoples, and the gulf of the sea they cross most quickly, hidden in mist and cloud, nor ever have they fear of damage or shipwreck. Envy was regarded as a great vice in classical Greece. It was believed that envy could be projected through the eyes of mortals and supernatural beings. This belief is widely known as the evil eye. Magicians were able to cast spells through their eyes. Medusa springs to mind, turning people to stone with her deadly gaze. Envy and eye magic was countered by magical charms, known as apotropaions. Eyes were often used for this purpose, so it is possible that the ship eyes were used to protect against the evil eye, or to cast it upon the enemy. The ship eyes do not appear to have survived into the Middle Ages. From what I could discern from medieval manuscripts from Byzantium and the 16th century north, medieval ships weren't as decorated as their ancestors and descendants. Figureheads appeared on occasions as exceptions to the rule. In the Alexiad, written in 1148, Anakomnenos wrote how, as he knew that the peasants were skilled in sea warfare and dreaded a battle with them, on the prow of each ship he had a head fixed of a lion or other land animal, made in brass or iron, with their mouth open and then gilded over, so that their mere aspect was terrifying. and the fire which was to be directed against the enemy through tubes, he made to pass through the mouths of the beasts, so that it seemed as if the lions and the other similar monsters were vomiting the fire. The fire she's speaking of was the famous Greek fire, a mysterious proto-flamethrower deployed by the Byzantines. The Vikings were the kings of early medieval ship decorations. The most lavishly decorated finding is the Oseberg ship from Norway. Her prow and stern are formed into 5-meter high arches, terminating in serpentine spirals. The sides are lavishly decorated with a frieze of fantastical monsters. However, the vessel was far from the norm. It was built as a pleasure craft for a local ruler, though it attests to the skill of the craftsman and the existence of garish decorations. Figureheads were more common among the Vikings. Vessels of all sizes were fitted with animal figureheads or weather vanes. This picture you're looking at now is an engraving of a Viking fleet found on a piece of wood in Norway. The vanes, known as merki, were made from bronze. They could have been fitted in the front of the ship or at the top of the mast, and though they could have been used to measure the wind, they seem to have primarily been used for identification. It is also known that the merki were taken down and used as banners on the battlefield. When William the Conqueror invaded England, his flagship, the Mora, was fitted with a papal banner as its merki, shown here on the Bayeux Tapestry. The Bayeux Tapestry also shows us the Norman ships with an assortment of figureheads. Dragons and bird-like beasts appear to have been the most common. 53 years prior, in 1013, a monk described the Danish fleet of Sven Forkbeard as follows: golden lions up in the mast-tops, giving the direction of the wind, and between them were various dragons spewing fire through their nostrils, and human figures in gold or silver, dressed with red. So aside from animal figureheads, there were apparently also human ones. They could have been used to represent the gods. Sven Forkbeard was baptized, but known for his pagan sympathies. The monk also described the smaller vessels in his fleet as being covered in pictures of gold and silver, and painted in beautiful colors. But back to the Bayeux Tapestry. When the Norman fleet reaches the English shore, we find the figureheads taken down. It was believed the figureheads would scare away the protective spirits, so there was a pagan tradition of taking them down before making landfall. It is very interesting to see this tradition survive among the Christian Normans. Figureheads and fanciful ship decorations died down in the Middle Ages. Decorations were limited to geometrical patterns brightly painted along the sides of the ship or on the sterns. Archaeological findings from the English Mary Rose, or the Swedish Mars, reveal that the geometrical decor was sometimes carved. Aside from pictorial evidence, we have a written description of the art featured aboard the Elephant, a ship commissioned by King Gustav Vasa of Sweden in 1559. We shall call her the Elephant, and so she'll be decorated and equipped, and it would not be disagreeable to have an elephant painted on her, as large as the painter might make it. The Baroque era was a renaissance for ship decorations. Imperialism was now the name of the game, and the purpose of art, both written, musical, and visual, was to express the power of your nation. Ships became a mobile form of propaganda, with which to remind both friends and enemies of your power. According to Louis XIV, it was a way in which to remind the commoners of their place in society. Lavish decorations were used by both monarchs and republics. Though the Dutch dressed in somber black, they had no qualms about lavish carved works. Not even the English Puritans did anything to hinder the bombasticness of their ships. This picture shows the figurehead of the 80-gun Naseby, depicting Oliver Cromwell on a horse. Her stern was no less garish. French neoclassicism was the dominant art style. Biblical motifs were common. This one depicts Abraham about to sacrifice his son before an angel arrives to stop him. The Renaissance had made classical literature widely available, and ship carvers sought inspiration from pagan mythology. This stern depicts Aphrodite, traveling in a cockle shell drawn by dolphins. She is attended by water nymphs and a winged attendant to Aura. Hercules often appeared on warships for obvious reasons. He was typically naked, except for a lion's mane. A variant of Hercules was the strange Wild Man. He's a naked giant wielding a club, and frequently appeared on Scandinavian vessels, and I've seen pictures of him appearing on houses in England. Oil paintings were often deployed in stern decorations. This watercolor was painted by an English sailor, Edward Barlow. The depicted frigate appears to have a stern painting of a royal figure, possibly a biblical character or maybe the King of England. Sometimes the paintings were a bit on the nose. This painting by Willem van der Velde shows a stern decorated with a painting of ships in a harbor, so it's a ship decorated with ships. The same idea is present in this illustration of the 80-gun Paris, launched in 1668. Below we see the French coat of arms, and her old painting depicts a ship from the classical era, like one of those we talked about before. Many of the visual ideas implemented in carved works had initially been used on land. In buildings, fireplaces, paintings were sometimes used to decorate buildings. The old office for the English East India Company was decorated by a painting of several ships. Carved works were a political statement, a giant dick flex. They might have been pretty to look at, but severely hindered the sailing qualities of a ship. The more bombastic creations were heavily criticized as dangerously impractical. It wasn't just the common sailor who disliked them. In some cases, even admirals refused to take command of overly decorated ships. If a ship like that was captured by pirates, like the 400-ton Trinity in 1680, they had the carved works removed. As the Baroque era calmed down, carved works slowly faded out of usage. In 1704, a restriction was introduced in England, both as an economic measure, but also to reduce the weight and windage of their ships, and thus improving their sailing qualities. As a result, the carved works of the 1700s became progressively simpler. Aside of their use as a political statement, carved works had a tactical use of identifying a ship. This picture shows the stern of the 1733 Dutch ship, De Boot. This literally means the boat, probably the best ship name ever. You can see the ship's name written in the middle of the stern, and at the top you find the logo of its owner, the VOC, Dutch East India Company. Flags were an unreliable way of identifying a ship's nationality, as you could easily fly a false flag. But in the mid-1700s, you could always identify a French ship from its carved works. They were a bit slower at abandoning their garish art. As late as 1799, the naval architect Frederick af Chapman wrote of the need for ornament to express its purpose in a manner that retains the beautiful contours of the ship's lines. Several of the ships designed by Chapman featured Norse mythology. One had the stern depicting the dragon, Ragval. 4 of his creations depicted famous Vikings like Ragnar Lothbrok, Björn Ironside, Ivar the Boneless, and Sigurd Snakeeye. Sadly, I couldn't find any visual depictions of these works. In the late 18th and 19th century, ship decorations were limited entirely to figureheads. National and classical legends were implemented in their design. This figurehead from an 1832 Swedish ship of the line depicts King Gustavus Adolphus. Another ship of the line built in 1860, the Odin, featured the one-eyed god at its prow. Originally he was flanked by his 2 companion ravens, but they appear to have been lost. If you enjoy the content I produce, consider supporting me monetarily on Patreon. You'll find the link in the video description. Otherwise, please give the video a like and a comment, so that YouTube will show it to more potential viewers. And why not share it with a friend? Cheers.